This past March, a small independent game publishing company made up of two people, Maddie and Joe Adams, wrapped up a successful crowdfunding campaign for their game, Meeple Inc. But then, 2 months later, in May 2024, a large board game publishing company called Hans im Glück sent them a letter demanding that the infringing project be removed immediately. What was going on? Well, buckle up, friends, because you're in for a wild ride. And be sure to watch all the way to the end, because just when you think the story can't get any weirder, there was recently a big twist in the story that you need to hear about. And at the very, very end of this video, I'll tell you the meaning behind the name Hans im Glück and how the behavior of the company Hans im Glück goes against everything that name stands for. So, Hans im Glück is a German publisher who came out with the very popular board game Carcassonne in the year 2000. This game features cute little human-shaped player pieces that were referred to as followers in the first printing of the game. Carcassonne was very popular and actually won the Spiel des Jahres Award, or the Game of the Year Award, for games that are released in Germany. And according to an article in the Texarkana Gazette, one player, Alison Hansel, called the little player pieces meeples. She accidentally combined the words my and people, creating meeple, said Alicia Neild, owner of Meeple City. It's in the dictionary and everything. And Allison would go on to write in a forum in November 2000, writing, I would like to propose that we call these meeples. We started calling the little people in Carcassonne this on Saturday, e.g. if I place this here, I would get 2 points and my meeple back. The word meeple would go on to become firmly ingrained in the vocabulary of the board gaming world, propelled in large part by the community on the website Board Game Geek. Hundreds of games, podcasts, YouTube channels, cafes, and stores have since incorporated the word and shape of the meeple in their names and logos. Hans im Glück obviously must have noticed this, because they changed followers to meeples in the rulebook and gamebox for Carcassonne. You can see here in the first edition of Carcassonne that was released in 2000, it lists 40 followers in the component section. And here I have the edition from 2016, which shows it has changed to 40 meeples. So everything seemed to be all good. The word meeple was being used by Hans im Glück and was also being used freely and widely by the gaming community who first created it and popularized it. But then, in 2017, 17 years after Carcassonne was first released and the word meeple was first used by Alison Hansel, Hans im Glück decided to apply for a trademark for both the name and the shape with the European Union Intellectual Property Office. But out of nowhere, a hero appears. CMON swoops in to try and save the day. CMON is another large board game publishing company, and they did not like what they saw Hans im Glück trying to do. And they filed an objection to the trademark application for the word meeple. CMON filed a document that is over 250 pages long, providing evidence as to why the application to trademark the word meeple should be denied. Specifically, they said, meeple must be refused due to 1, lack of distinctive character, 2, the fact that it is a descriptive term, 3, it being an indication that it has become customary in the current language or in the bona fide and established practices of the trade, and 4, it lacking the ability to distinguish goods of one undertaking from those of others. But despite CMON's efforts, the European Union Intellectual Property Office approved the registration of the trademark for the word and shape of the meeple to Hans im Glück in 2019. But the application for trademarking the word was only partially approved. You can see here it is marked as partially rejected. They were granted the trademark for the word meeple for use in many industries, but not for toys and games. So it seems CMON had a small victory there. Now, I'm not a trademark lawyer. I'm basing all of this on the evidence I have gathered from my research, so please be sure to comment below if you have more information to share about this situation. But just when you thought things couldn't get any more complicated, Hans im Glück then applied for the trademark for the word meeple in Germany, who fully approved the trademark in 2021, including for toys and games. Now, I can't find a registered trademark for the meeple shape in the database for registered German trademarks, so I'm assuming they did not apply for that because, according to the German Patent and Trademark Office, your design must be new at the time of filing the application, i.e. before the filing date, no identical design or design whose features differ only in immaterial details must have been made available to the public. In addition, your design must have individual character. Hence, the overall impression it produces must differ from the overall impression produced by any design which has been made available to the public. And obviously, the meeple shape is not a new design and has been widely used by many people for over 2 decades. Now, we know Hans im Glück did not create the word meeple, and it could be argued they didn't even invent the meeple shape either. Remember that forum post from Alison Hansel back in November 2000? Well, in that same post, she also mentions the game Europa and how the Carcassonne pieces remind her of the pieces in that game. Europa came out in 1998, 2 years before Carcassonne, and featured these human-looking player pieces. Here is the player piece from Europa, and here is the player piece from Carcassonne. And yes, you could argue that the meeples in Carcassonne are slightly stockier with longer arms, but my goodness, they are pretty similar. I'll leave it up to you to decide if you think they are distinctly different. In that same forum post, Alison also mentions a game called Sumera that came out in 1999, 1 year before Carcassonne. You can definitely see meeple-looking pieces in this game as well. But then, if we go back even further to 1984, a game called Top Secret Spies was published by Ravensburger and even won the Spiel des Jahres award just like Carcassonne would 16 years later. Top Secret Spies featured human-shaped player pieces. You can see them here. And according to Wikipedia, it is said that this is the first game to feature what we now call a meeple. And that's the thing. Even though these pieces are wearing hats and are a slightly different shape from the pieces in Carcassonne, I would still call them meeples. Meeple, according to Wikipedia, means a small board game piece usually with a stylized human form, not this specific shape exactly. And the thing is, in the years since Europa, Sumera, and Carcassonne came out, many games have used meeples as components. I went to my game shelf, which is not huge. I have about 50 games, and I was quickly able to find several games that use meeples. Karuba, Viticulture, and Escape Curse of the Temple all have meeples wearing hats. Lords of Waterdeep have meeples with arms at their side. And King and Queen Domino have meeples with castle sort of looking heads and some holding shields. Now, you could say that none of those pieces are the exact shape that Hans im Glück trademarks, so let's find some exact matches. Here are meeples in Mutant Meeples that came out in 2012. Here are meeples in Terror in Meeple City that came out in 2013. Here are meeples in Tiny Epic Kingdom that came out in 2014. Here are meeples in Meeple War that came out in 2016. Here are meeples in Meeple Circus that came out in 2017. Here are meeples from Meeple Land that came out in 2020. And here are meeples from Meeples and Monsters that came out in 2022. This is after Hans im Glück had the trademark in the EU and Germany. And it's interesting that they didn't get a cease and desist letter from Hans im Glück. I could keep going, but I think I've made my point, which is to show that the exact meeple shape that Hans im Glück has trademarked has been used in many games, and if something has become common and generic, it should not be trademarked. So that brings us back to May 2024, where Hans im Glück decided to send a letter to a small indie publishing company made up of 2 people who were running a crowdfunding campaign for their indie game Meeple Inc., telling them to immediately remove the infringing project. Now, this indie game company is based out of the UK, which is not in the EU and is obviously not in Germany. So they are outside of the jurisdiction of Hans im Glück's trademarks. And remember that Hans im Glück's EU trademark for the word meeple does not include toys and games. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer and I haven't seen the letter, so I don't know exactly what they said to show that they had any right to demand Maddie and Joe remove the word meeple from their game or remove the project entirely. There is speculation that Meeple Inc. was available to be shipped to backers in Germany, which then I guess Hans im Glück could say infringed on their trademark in Germany. It's not very clear, so if there are any trademark lawyers watching this, please let me know in the comments if Hans im Glück even had the right to send this letter to a company based in the UK. I can't imagine how scary that must have been to get a letter from a lawyer on behalf of a large company like Hans im Glück. So Maddie and Joe, who I do not know, I just discovered them after hearing about this whole debacle, and I'm looking into the situation completely independently. They did not ask me to say any of this. But they changed the name of their game from Meeple Inc. to Tabletop Inc. And I'm sure out of extra caution, they also changed the name of their company that was previously called Cogito Ergo Meeple to Cotswold Games. Now keep in mind that Hans and Glück sent this letter 2 months after the Meeple Inc. campaign was over. So there was a chance that Maddie and Joe had already printed their games, which would have been a massive loss of money if they would then not be allowed to sell any of that inventory. Thankfully, they had not printed anything yet, and according to their updates on their crowdfunding campaign, they said it was relatively easy to make updates to the wording in the game. And to their credit, they have handled this situation really well. Way better than I would have. They've been super chill about it in general. But I find it really scary and disappointing that Hans and Glück chose to threaten a small indie studio rather than go after any of the other large companies who have used both the word and the shape in years past. A lot of people are speculating that they did this because they knew Maddie and Joe likely did not have the funds to fight back. And some people are speculating that Hans and Glück knew they likely wouldn't fight back and that they could use this victory as precedent if they were to now go after medium and large-sized companies that use the word or shape of a meeple. And even more speculation is that Hans and Glück possibly decided to do this now because according to the German Patent and Trademark Office, your trademark can be revoked due to inactivity. So they might randomly send a cease and desist letter to small publishers who don't have the resources to fight back just to keep their trademark active. But now, after all of this, there's another big twist in the story. A couple of weeks ago, 2 Americans, Corey Thompson and Marion McBride, decided to apply for the US trademark for the word meeple. Corey is one of the co-hosts of the Board Games Insider podcast, and Marion is the event manager at Gen Con. According to Corey, Marion and I already decided we have no plans at all to make any profit from this adventure. I believe we decided anyone can use our trademark for credit and candy. The side effect of this is that we intend to protect the US trademark from predatory action. We would really love for the wordmark to be usable by anyone. So it seems this is a bit of a joke and done more tongue-in-cheek to prove a point, but I honestly am not a huge fan of this. The word meeple should not be trademarked. At all, whether your intentions are good or bad. Something that is common and generic should not be claimed and owned by anyone. So while I understand they're doing this to protect it from someone who might apply for it with malicious intent, I truly hope their application is denied. If it is approved, I do worry that more people are going to start applying for trademarks for other commonly used words in the board gaming community, and the whole thing is going to become an even bigger mess with small independent designers and publishers getting the worst of it. An article on the International Property Law Association website talks about the implications this trademark could have on game developers. The enforcement of trademark rights on meeple means that game developers may need to obtain permission or pay licensing fees to use the term in their products. This could lead to increased costs and logistical challenges, particularly for small or independent developers. The need to navigate the complexities of intellectual property law might also stifle creativity and innovation within the industry, which is really the main issue here. This community is supposed to be about collaboration and innovation. And companies and lawyers trying to control and own commonly used words and images is not what this industry should be about. And big companies bullying small indie studios is something we should all take very seriously. Many people have talked about boycotting Hans and Glück's products, but I do not support that approach at all because that will directly impact the designers who have games with them and earn royalties from their sales. So instead, let's turn this unfortunate situation around and support Maddie and Joe's game Tabletop Inc. even harder. I'll link to their GameFound campaign page below, which is still accepting late pledges. Their game looks super fun. It's a worker placement game, which is one of my favorite mechanics, and players take on the role of board game publishers collecting the perfect mix of artwork, components, and mechanisms to build the greatest board games in the world. So you mean I get to see what it feels like to be an all-powerful board game publisher who gets to call all the shots? It looks like a really cool game. You should check it out. As for Hans im Glück, let me tell you a story. The name Hans im Glück means Hans in luck, and it's a folktale about a young boy who sets out on a journey to go visit his mother. He starts with a handful of gold and decides to spend it on a horse to make his journey easier. But Hans gets bucked off the horse, and so he decides to trade the horse for a cow so he can have milk on his journey. But the cow doesn't produce any milk, so he trades the cow for a pig, only to find the pig belonged to someone else and he might get arrested for taking that pig. So he trades the pig for a goose, planning on turning it into a yummy roast. But he meets a stone grinder who convinces him to trade the goose for a grinding stone, which could turn into a lucrative source of income. But when Hans bends down to take a drink of water from the river, the grindstone falls into the water and is lost. But he actually feels relief to not be weighed down by money or other materialistic goods, and he sets off to finish his journey unencumbered to see his mother and tell her the tale. The point of the story is to remember that happiness is not achieved through ownership of things. It seems the people at Hans im Glück might want to reread the story their name is based on, and hopefully they'll do the right thing and revoke their trademark on a word and shape that belong to everyone in this community. And if that angle doesn't do it for them, revoking their trademark would be a smart business decision, because not only would it repair some of the trust they broke with their recent behavior, I would argue that the widespread use of the word and shape of the meeple would make Hans im Glück even more money, because people might hear the word or see the shape and want to learn more about it. And when they ask people about it or Google it, they would likely learn about the game Carcassonne and then might want to buy it and all of its expansions. I truly believe that everyone can win here. This is not a zero-sum game. Like, people aren't thinking, well, if I buy Meeple Inc., then I'm not going to buy Carcassonne. And I would actually argue that Meeple Inc. could have possibly brought even more people into the hobby who might then go on to buy Carcassonne or other Hans im Glück games. But if they really want to maintain ownership over the word and shape of the meeple, it would be really cool if they made a statement saying that anyone and everyone can use the word and shape freely without any fear of retaliation from them. Apparently, they have said that if you ask them nicely, they'll let you use the word and shape of the meeple without retaliation or having to pay them licensing fees. Besides the fact that that is an incredibly patronizing comment, it also punishes small, independent designers and publishers who might not be aware that this word and shape that are widely used in the gaming community are trademarked. This approach really only benefits Hans im Glück's friends, who are also large publishing companies that are aware of this trademark, and not the many indies who might not be in the know. In conclusion, it is not too late for Hans im Glück to make things right, not only for them, but for the board game industry and community at large. Well, if you made it this far, I want to thank you for sticking around until the end. As an independent game designer myself, this story really hit home for me, and I did a much deeper dive than I expected to do. I felt like I was back in school writing a research paper. All of this research took quite a bit of time and effort. I downloaded and reviewed many pages of documents, including the trademark applications and objections, much of which I had to translate from German, because I wanted to get as many primary sources as I could. If you want to support the work I did for this video, I would really appreciate a like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos about game design and the board games industry. And if you want to support me even more, you can become a member, which comes with some really great perks, including playtesting games with me and other members on Sunday, members-only streams, and access to members-only channels on my Discord server. I want to thank you again for watching all the way to the end, and I would really like to know what you think about this whole situation in the comments below. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.